the carjackers have deliberately rear-ended the victim's car, and when he's got out to have a look at the damage, this is when they've actually pulled a knife on him. Now,
a Bayside family has a message for the Premier after they became the latest victims of Melbourne's crime crisis. Thieves broke into their home after dark.
Just two. 3. Oh my God, that's really, oh my God.
Woodley was watching the tennis inside their home when a group of 6 people stormed through the backyard, some of them armed with machetes, but police were hot on their trail.
Hey, this is Driver 88, and I've had a growing problem on my mind over the last few years, and that is the seemingly quite sharp rise in home invasions and car theft in my state of Victoria. It has become such a sort of big focus in the media that I wanted to do a little bit more of a dive and check whether this is, I guess, a media beat up or whether this is a really bad and increasingly bad reality for everyone in my state. What I wanted to do was maybe give a quick chat on my anecdotal experience of this problem here in Melbourne, and then look at the media's representation, and then look at a bit of data. So that we can kind of make sense of what is going on and how bad things are potentially getting. So there's no doubt that the mainstream media will do or say absolutely anything to get you to click on articles if they know they can build a particular fear in the community. So I'm not always wanting to be swayed by some sort of mainstream media focus of the day, because data can easily be skewed and so can opinion. However, Anecdotally, my personal experience is quite grim. Over the last 5 years, I've had no less than 3 direct friends, as well as family, have their homes invaded by armed youths, threatened, and had their cars stolen. If I fan out my anecdotal evidence for friends in car clubs, friends that I have met through cars, from track days and WhatsApp chat groups, which are all car focused. I could easily think of a dozen cases in the last 5 years since lockdown that I've had, again, armed youths in people's residential homes to steal their SUVs in most cases and steal their cars. So anecdotally, it looks pretty bad, to be honest. And that has definitely been a big cause of why I've done this video. However, I don't just see my own personal experience and the media as the only be all and end all of what is actually happening on a wider scope for a, I guess, population trend. So Victoria, is it becoming a more crime-ridden state than ever to live in? Well, if we look at the last 10 years and widen the scope on crimestats.gov, I can tell you that more criminal incidents ever recorded in the history of the state happened between September 23 to September 24. 431,000 criminal incidents recorded, which was the highest that's ever been. But just because that is the most recorded ever incidents doesn't mean that overall, per capita, we're living in a more dangerous state, because our population has exploded in the last 10 years. We've added over 1 million people to this state since 2015, and that makes last year's criminal incidents per capita as the 3rd highest of the last 10 years. Certainly not a good result at all, but not the worst ever. So take that as you will. Now, the way I see things in the media, it feels to me that it's never been easier to steal a modern car. With the way that people can buy components off the dark web and even the most simple bits of technology from eBay to stick into your OBD port and steal your vehicle. In particular, the massive amount of HSVs and late model Holdens that have been stolen recently with very, very simple tech. I've even noticed a growing rise in people using the old school steering locks. Do you remember those? The last time I saw one, it must have been, I guess, in my own car, was when I was like 8 years old. My mum had a Land Cruiser and we would park somewhere, I won't say where, and we'll stick the steering wheel lock. And that seems like maybe a good idea. Maybe we should all be buying steering locks from now on. On top of that, of course, having a manual gearbox is also a really good youth deterrent to having your car being stolen. Now, before we get to the other car theft statistics, I thought I'd just give you a little criminal Victorian entree statistic to get started. License plates being stolen. 10 years ago, there was about 12,500 or so stolen. The population in this last 10 years has gone up 20%, but the chance of you having your license plate stolen in this lovely state has doubled. So that's just a nice little statistic to get us started in this state. And of course is a lovely precursor to all sorts of crimes that people will commit with your stolen license plates. So the next graph I'll show you is the most important one in this vlog, and that is the last 30 years of victims of car theft in Australia. And you can see that this is a wildly varying graph over that time. You'll see a massive drop down into the 2000s, which plateaued for a long time, and then sadly over the last 3 to 4 years has drastically shot up since lockdown. And we've seen Victoria, good old Victoria, be the #1 contributor, jumping 25% up in 2023, and in 2024 again up over 20% in car thefts, hitting 25,000 cars stolen in this state. And that trend seems to not really be slowing down at all. Thankfully, Victorian police in the last 18 months or so have put together their special Operation Trinity, which I've seen some data to suggest that that is working. I certainly hope that it will continue to improve. It's sad that there's a time where now police need to have boots on the ground in your everyday suburb, just patrolling because there is that much crime going on in Victoria. One thing that has astounded me about this graph is what the hell was happening in Australia in the 90s and the early 2000s. There were 7 less million people living in this country, and victims of car theft were more than double they are today. It seems like there was some sort of insane JDM gone in 60 seconds madhouse of crime going on in Victoria and Australia in the 90s and about to 2001 or so till it dropped off, that people sort of maybe don't really talk about much these days. It was certainly God knows how many times worse than it is today, and I guess that was for a number of reasons. But one other common trend that people seem to be really concerned about today is that the kids are bad. The kids are in trouble, they're causing all sorts of issues. Today's generation is worse than the last one, etc. I wanted to find some sort of data to see whether that is true. As far as I can see from crimestats.gov, 10 years ago, 40% of all car thefts were caused by people between the ages of 15 and 19, and that statistic hasn't changed 10 years later in 2024. Now, of course, mainstream media has heavily infiltrated social media, unfortunately, and I have been perusing a number of these clips on TikTok and Instagram, and I've noticed that one of the key things that people are commenting are one of two, and one is deport them just out of the blue, even if they don't know, I guess, what background they are. And the other one is harsher sentencing. So just put these youths in jail for as long as possible if they commit these crimes, and that will solve your problem. Those two things are for you guys to just make your own decision on. That's far too political for a car channel. But one thing that I think is really missing about the discussion here is the issue of organized crime. I don't think these youths are having like detailed international chop shop operations. I think that they're more than likely being influenced and paid peanuts to go and commit these crimes, because organized crime knows that these kids are getting bail and just being sent out time and time again, and then they can send them to places, find your car, and then send some people over that have very little consequences to take your vehicle, and then get them to retrieve them, and then they, you know, do their thing with your car parts and send them all over the world, and etc, etc. There seems to be an organized crime aspect that the media and people in the comments section do not focus on. Sure, we have this youth, I guess, crime problem, but too many people don't seem to see that it's been influenced from much higher above. It's that classic sort of story where people aren't cutting the head off, they're just looking at what's going on down below. Anyway, something else to think about. So in conclusion, the car thefts in Victoria have reached a 10+ year high, albeit with a strikingly larger population. Also, they are nowhere near as bad as they were 20+ years ago. The increase is quite severe, and if it continues to be so, could potentially reach those rates of the early 2000s. The most sobering and saddest statistic that I'll leave you with for the end of this vlog is the number of aggravated burglaries here in Victoria over the last decade. Since 2015, aggravated burglary, that's usually a number of people with someone in a residential home with usually weapons, and the person in the residential home often becoming injured, has gone up 148% in just the last decade. It's a sobering thing to think about and hopefully doesn't continue to increase. That being said, this is Driver 88. We usually review sports cars and supercars and have a great time, so we'll be doing that for our following vlogs, and we'll see you then. Thank you.